Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to today's event. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty, so I can't show the title slide, but we are very excited to have you here for today's event, a nonprofit recruiting pros tips for succeeding in the job search. We are going to give everyone a minute or so to get settled, and then we will jump right in since we're starting a little bit late. So settle in, kick your feet up, and excited to get started in just a couple of seconds. And if you're just joining us, we are going to get started in just a moment. We're just giving folks time to get in and get settled, but welcome to today's event. All right, for the sake of time, let's go ahead and get started. So for a third time, if you've been with us for 90 seconds, welcome to today's event, Nonprofit Recruiting Pros, Tips for Succeeding in the Job Search. Very excited to be with you all today. My name is Britt Gergen. I am a Director of Product Marketing here at Handshake. I will be emceeing, and yeah, let's dive right in. So as a bit of background, you all know fall recruitment is in full swing right now, and we really want to give you all tools to be successful in a wide variety of different career paths. So that's why this fall, we're bringing in recruiters in different industries and disciplines to answer your questions, which is what we're here to do today. So today's panelist is a nonprofit recruiter with years of experience sourcing and collaborating with early talent. He's going to share tips and tricks for making a good impression with hiring professionals like him in today's job market. So from an agenda perspective, what you can expect is for the next 20 minutes or so, we'll have a structured conversation, but you can feel free to submit questions using the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can before we wrap up. We'll have some time for live Q&A at the end, so we'll read some of those aloud. As a reminder, you won't be able to see the questions submitted by others until we mark them as answered live, so please don't think we're ignoring yours. We just tend to get a lot of questions in these events. We do our very best to get to all of them. But if we can't get to your question today, we will use it to inform future events like this one. So keep coming back. And with that, I want to introduce today's special guest, special panelist. Randal, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Britt, and hello, everyone. My name is Randal McKoy. I serve as a recruiter with City Year, part of the McKoy National Service Program. And just to introduce myself quickly, I am originally from New Jersey, grew up in northern New Jersey, and got excited about the thought of really making an impact in the world. And so I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. to do my service year there in Washington, D.C. in the McKoy National Service Program. Fell in love with impact work, fell in love with the idea of becoming a humanitarian. And so after my service year, I was able to, through our alumni network, to secure an internship with the United Nations. And that brought me to Jamaica for about 5 months, where I completed an internship there. I returned, completed my master's degree, and was able to move to Barbados. That's where the singer Rihanna's from, her island. I was out there for about a year working on United Nations projects. And then I was able to move to Hawaii for about 5 years, where I was working on UN projects with the Micronesian community out there in the Pacific region before I came full circle with this role as a recruiter, which I felt was like a perfect, somewhat conclusion to not the end of my career, but to actually help people get started the way I did, which is through a service year. So that was what brought me here to City, and it's so great to be with you all today.
Fantastic. What a career journey. I would guess maybe you also have a passion for travel, it sounds like, somewhere in there.
You are speaking my language now, Britt. Like that was
Just a guess, you know.
that was a part of the whole, I would say, complement to the work
Yeah,
in my service year with the UN was to travel and see the world. So yeah, definitely.
incredible. Well, we'll definitely dig in that on that in a minute, but I wanted to start off with an easy one. So I'm sure folks out there are wondering about the different paths that come out of taking a service year like you did. Could you speak to the opportunities within the nonprofit space as well as outside of it that job seekers could pursue after a gap year, or sorry, a service year?
Absolutely. One of the most important aspects I would want to share with you as a foundation for a service year, especially with City Year, is that it sets the stage for so many different career paths that you can go
Yeah.
down, both in the nonprofit and also outside of the nonprofit center. So First, within the nonprofit world, completing a year of service allows you to position yourself as a person who's into mission-driven work. And so when people look at your resume, they know you've been on the front lines making an impact. You're a strong candidate, whether you want to get involved in community outreach, education, nonprofit leadership. Many of our AmeriCorps members go on to work in the nonprofits, which focus on social justice. But outside of the nonprofit sector, many go on to lead in business, economic development. Some just go on to literally become entrepreneurs. Some go in the healthcare field. So it's a very broad, I would say, alumni network as far as what people do after a service year.
Yeah, so it's a way to obviously give back and do the service, but also to build up your network to open up potential future opportunities, it sounds like.
That's right.
Love it. Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about the recruiter perspective of your career journey. So let's talk about what people like you in a recruiting space are looking for from candidates in terms of their profiles. And I'm talking about Handshake, LinkedIn, other professional platforms. What are the green flags you're looking for in a candidate's profile?
Wow, great question. And I'll start by this. When we're looking at profiles, LinkedIn, Handshake, you know, different platforms, we definitely want to see a clear and purpose-driven summary. So like when I go on
Mm,
Handshake, I'm looking at a particular profile, I'm going directly to that about section, and I'm trying to see, we want to see what motivates you. What impact are you actually aiming to have as you move forward in your career, and what actually drives you as a professional. So even if you don't have a lot of experience, just sharing your passion in that about profile shows us a lot about what you're for and what you want to pursue. And so on the flip side of that, what are some red flags? Not really
yeah.
tailoring your profile to your goals and your passion,
Hmm.
and kind of leaving that vague. So we do want to see what you're about, and you
Yeah.
can really put that into your profile, even if you don't have experience yet. You're kind of sharing those goals and visions in your about profile.
Love that. Okay, so everybody here, you heard it here first. Fill out the summary section at the top of your Handshake profile. Recruiters are looking at it. It's a very important way to stand out. Cool. Okay, next up, are there any skills that pertain to working in nonprofit spaces that you often see overlooked by job seekers in their application? What are people forgetting to highlight?
Oh wow. That's pretty good as far as you getting down to some of our little pet peeves as recruiters. Because one way you can really stand out is to quantify your achievements where possible. So, for example, rather than saying I helped organize an event, you probably want to say something along the lines that you coordinated a team of 5 to plan and execute an event for 200 attendees. So,
Yep,
being more specific about what you actually did more so than just a general sentence in your resume or your profile goes
yep.
along with recruiters.
Cool, love it. And I realize I just skipped ahead a little bit in our questioning. So we talked a bit there about like how you can make a good first impression, bring numbers into the space. Are there any other, I guess, any other advice you have about making a good first impression when it comes to your resume?
One big one, everyone, is just telling your resume. We all have a generic resume, and none of us like redoing it and going over it from
Yeah,
time to time, but you don't need to do a whole resume over, but you know that you're going for a specific role. How can you go into some of those keywords and add that into the resume?
yeah,
One of the biggest mistakes that we see is candidates sending the same generic resume to every job. You don't want to do that.
yeah.
Instead, just take those few minutes, tailor the resume, highlight the skills and the experiences that are specific to that job. It will go a long way with recruiters. It shows not only that you're serious about the job, but this is what you really want to do. So taking those extra few minutes, tailoring, going into your resume and putting in some of those keywords to the job posting is going to go a long way to your career for sure.
I think that's a great insight. Like reading the job description that you're applying for and pulling out the words that are specifically used there and finding ways to weave them into the experience that you're explaining on your resume. That's how that tailoring works. It might feel really overwhelming, like you have to crack some kind of code. And it's like, no, no, no. The code book is right there. It is the job posting itself. It's got everything you need in it.
Definitely.
Cool. Okay, so moving on, I know a lot of folks will also ask about specific protocols that are unique to each industry. Could you walk us through what recruitment looks like in the government nonprofit space? Like, what types of roles are you currently recruiting for?
That's great. So a couple things are going on as far as the nonprofit world with AmeriCorps. You could specifically apply to staff positions with
Hmm.
us, or you can specifically decide that you want to get into a service year with the nonprofit sector. So you can look at it as, do you want to immediately jump into a staff role within the governmental nonprofit sector? Or do you actually want to, for example, serve a year with us in City Year? Or I
Hmm.
would throw in there as well Peace Corps overseas, which is a 2-year program, which
Hmm.
allows you to build up the necessary skills before you actually jump into the workforce. So I think it's a decision that you would have to make at this point in your career. Do you want to gain some more experience, or do you want to jump directly into the sector and work? Does that make sense?
Gotcha. It does, yeah. So if you're ready to jump into the sector, that's maybe suggesting you've had some past internships or something that might help you position yourself for that regular like opportunity as opposed to going the service year route.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. So the service year route, again, as you mentioned earlier, is a really nice way to build up that experience and also build up your network before you head into the workforce. Love it. Cool. Okay. So let's talk about making it past the application. What advice would you give for standing out to a recruiter during the first interview? Obviously, it can be very stressful going into an interview situation. What advice can you give these nice folks?
Well, everybody, I got good news. So, as far as our sector is not as stressful as other sectors for a couple reasons. We're not necessarily looking for experience yet. And
Hmm.
I know sometimes it can be frustrating when you see a job posting and it says we want X amount of years experience, and then you're saying to
Yeah.
yourself, well, I haven't even worked yet. So how do I, even remotely think about applying to that role? We're not necessarily looking for experience in the sector. We are looking for your passion and your desire to make impact in the world. And you being able to present yourself that way, speak about that passion and that desire to really affect other people's lives really is the foundation for being successful in the application process more than the skill sets or what you've experienced already. No, we want to know, okay, this is a person that has empathy. They really want to do impactful work in the world more so than, okay, they have 5 years experience doing education, or they are a math expert or an English expert already. No, we definitely want to kind of sense your passion and your desire and what you're hoping to achieve in the world. That's the number one thing. So it's not as much of a stressful process as you may assume just based on other sectors.
Yeah.
But you being able to sell yourself as far as your passion, your dreams, and your desires to make impact in other people's lives is going to go a long way in the application process. And by the time you have that first interview, so sell yourself, talk about your dreams, talk about your desire to make impact, and you'll go a long way in the application process in this sector. I can guarantee you that. That's what got me here.
Love
So,
that.
yeah.
Totally. Dig deep, find out what motivates you. I love that advice. And it sounds too like, again, this is not the type of interview where you need to be so concerned about having a ton of experience. So stuff like your coursework, your clubs and organizations that you're a part of, they can help like back up that narrative about what drives you, I would imagine as well. Do you feel like you see a lot of candidates talking about those types of experiences when they're interviewing with you?
Yeah, I think, and just to be transparent, there is this I wouldn't call it fear, but there is this and I think it's written into the job application process where a lot of candidates feel they need to have certain experience to
Yeah.
serve or to get involved in our type of sector. But the truth is, and I every time I speak to the candidate, I want to make it clear to them, listen, I need you to just what are you hoping to achieve? What impact are you hoping to make in people's lives? What
Yeah.
volunteer experience have you had so far? More so than even work experience. Have you done anything in your community? Have you volunteered for any projects growing up in your middle school, high school? Doesn't make a difference. Those are the things we're looking for because part of the service year is actually building the skills, building the leadership qualities to move on to the career choice that you have in
Yeah.
mind. So we're looking to actually help you to build those skills but we want to see what your desires are. We want to see what your passion is. And that's our number one desire as a recruiter.
Love it. Cool. Well, before we jump over into the Q&A portion, we have a couple of little rapid fire questions. We do have time, so you don't have to answer me in like 5 seconds, but make it pithy. Okay, so first up, cover letter. What do you think? Yay or nay?
Cover letter, great idea, not necessary in our sector, but if you decide to do one, it's going to help you as far as sharing outside of your resume and
Yep.
outside of us going line by line in your resume. You're able to kind of share some personal experiences, some stories. That'll go a long way, but certainly not necessary or mandatory to apply in this sector.
Cool. Okay. How about this one? A thank you note after your interview, yes or no?
Now, for us as recruiters in this sector, that doesn't have to be a formal letter. That could literally be a phone call or a text or an email.
Mhm.
Thank you. And just to be transparent, we don't get a lot of that. So when we do, we're like, okay, wow, this is exciting. And
Love
we
it.
add that personal note into your profile. So it goes a long way just to say thank you, but you don't have to do it in a traditional way.
Love that. Cool. Okay, last one. Paper resumes, good idea, unnecessary.
Somewhat unnecessary in 2024. Everything is, for the most part, done digital. So no. And for the most part, you can focus on applying to us directly online. And we're making it even easier where you can actually go on your phone, apply real simple, make it easy. So really not necessary for our type of positions that we offer.
Cool. Love it. Let's save the trees, less printing out. Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that, Randall. We're going to move into the Q&A portion. And as Emily mentioned in the chat, we've had a lot of great questions already. So we're going to start running through some of those. But if you have a question that you just thought of, please still don't hesitate to drop it into the Q&A. We're going to do as many of these as we can. Okay, so first one for you, Randall. And we touched on this a bit, but maybe there's more to say here. We had a question come in. What are the positions that you actually recruit for, you yourself?
Specifically, we're recruiting for full-time and part-time positions as student success coaches. So this involves whether you want to work full-time as a student success coach, where you're going to be primarily taking on somewhat of a life coach role in the educational sphere. You're not teaching, you're not substitute teaching. You're taking on a holistic approach to the educational field and supporting students and supporting schools. And that's why we call it a student success coach, because you are supporting academically, but a big part of the position is to support students socially and emotionally. So you are taking on this role somewhat of a life coach where you can help them academically, but a big part of it is motivating them to be the best that they can be every day. And so we have part-time and full-time roles, and this is specifically what I'm recruiting for. Sit here.
Fantastic. And I saw we just dropped the interest form in the chat. So folks definitely grab that link and fill it out after today's session. Okay, next up and related, we talked about this a bit too, but I think good to drive the point home. How can I tailor my resume for the types of roles that you're recruiting for, Randall, if I have no relevant experience? Touch on some of these. Let's hit the highlights again.
Great. So have you volunteered for anything so far? Putting that front and center. But also front and center, again, let's go back to sharing your desire, sharing your passion for service, sharing your hope to make impact in the world. Front and center on your resume is going to go a long way to what we're hiring for, more so than listing your experiences and your years in any particular sector. No, but as a highlight, front and center resume is to share any volunteer experiences that you've had so far, any community development type of work, but more so than that, even if you haven't done that, share your passion, put that into written form. This is what I hope to achieve. This is the impact that I'm hoping to make, and that will go a long way.
Fabulous. Okay, here's a good one. When is the best time to complete the service year? Would you say, is this like an after you've graduated kind of thing? Is it something where you would recommend taking what are your thoughts?
Great question. It's somewhat subjective. And what do I mean by that? You got to look at it as we have opportunities for a full year role, which runs for a year. So that's from one summer to the following summer. You got to look at that as from July through the following July. But we also have a mid-year role, which begins in January, and you would
Mhm.
only 6 months from January through June. So depending on where you are, we have a lot of candidates that are fresh out of high school. We have those that are fresh out of college. We have those that just want to take a break before they go to grad school or law school. So
Mhm.
depending on where you are in your career goals, it's only either 6 months or 11 months that you're taking to do your service project, which sets you up for what you want to do next. So it's somewhat subjective of you looking where you are right now in your career goals, but it's only a 6 month to 11th month commitment, which is not too long. And I think that's the benefit of taking a service year because it's not a long-term process.
Totally. You've got flexibility, you've got options. Love it. Okay. Here's one that's more broadly about recruiting. So curious to hear your philosophy on this. If the recruiter tells us that they will be in touch and then we don't hear from them again, should we reach out?
You definitely should. Recruiters are, as you probably would imagine, very busy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of folks they're talking to. Um, but I'll be honest with you, 9 times out of 10, we will follow up with you. And even with this form that we shared today, that would create a profile where I personally would be able to go in and just make sure, even if it's been a number of months or some weeks, to touch base with you. But it never hurts just to shoot a recruiter an email, just to touch base, or even a call or a text. We love talking to candidates, just so you know, like for my role, we love talking to you. We're never too busy to take that communication. So take that opportunity. It's been a few weeks. Maybe you have some questions. We love to answer them. This is what we do every day. Talk to candidates, cultivate candidates, communicate with candidates. So never hesitate to reach out. It's never a burden. It's never an inconvenience to hear from you. So please reach out.
Yeah. I'll just share from my experience too. I will typically reach out at least once a week if I'm waiting to hear back on like the status of a next step for an interview. Um, I feel like that's usually been a pretty reasonable thing to check in on, especially if your recruiter has not given you a timeline for getting back to you. I think oftentimes I've gotten a timeline of when I should expect to hear, so that can help guide your outreach. But once a week has usually been my rule of thumb as well. Cool. Okay, here's another really good one. When putting in terms from the recruitment, it can sometimes feel artificial because of the language used for job recruitment. How do I make it feel more authentic without losing that specificity? So I think it's like,
Yeah.
well, I'll let you interpret that question if you have thoughts on it.
Well, I love it because whoever asked that great question, it's something that I take personal that I try to bring
Yeah,
into the recruitment space. No one wants to read or send out a message that sounds robotic, like it's not about me as the candidate. And so I take this very seriously. I feel that in whatever you're doing, this is about relationship building in some ways as well when you're dealing with candidates. And I tend to run away from the generic, run away from the robotic.
yep,
I like to tailor message directly to that candidate, but I also like to put myself in their shoes, their goals, their desires, what they're hoping to achieve, some of their challenges. Sometime with service share work, a lot of it is budgeting. As far as them moving to another city to do a service share and trying to figure out, okay, where they're going to stay, where they're going to live, how they're going to afford it. I want to be active in that. So for me, it's more serious than just sending out a generic email, a generic message on Handshake. I'm trying to tailor it to that person and what they're hoping to achieve, but also our initial conversation. So I encourage everyone, whether on the recruitment side or the candidate side, it's never a great idea to just be generic about outreach and recruitment. I think you have to be a little bit more intentional about relationship and also understanding where the candidate is coming from. I think it's so serious in our process. So that's what I do every day. And I try to put that out there in the recruitment space as well to make it more organic. Yeah.
cool. Yeah, love it. It goes back to that like notion of specificity, what drives you, like dig deep and think about what your motivators are and what's the most impactful or exciting thing you think you've worked on and lead with that excitement. Cool. Okay, we've gotten a couple of questions about structuring the resume, and I really like this one. So I'm gonna go into this one, see if you have thoughts. I've heard that for resumes, you shouldn't go in detail when describing your skills or past job positions. How can we balance description and directness?
Great question.
Yeah.
To somewhat play the little bit of the advocate here, on the
Yeah.
flip side, sometimes what we notice is, especially in the age of AI and what's going on now, people can overdo it, and it can come across as a overkill. And how genuine is this presentation in this resume? Because it can come across sometimes as just a little too much from a recruitment end. We're looking and we see countless resumes. We want to know you. We want to know what's unique to you and what specifically you're bringing to the table. There's 10 people applying to the same position. We're going to see some of the same skill sets listed, but what sets you apart? And so that's not necessarily going to be you just listing a bunch of specific details, but just adding in your personal story. Some of the personal things that are unique to you goes a lot further than just adding more data to the resume, if that makes sense. We want to know you. We want to know what's going to separate you from the other 10 resumes that we just looked over for the same position. And as a recruiter, when you see that uniqueness, you tend to want to get to know more about that candidate. You want to reach out. You want to set up that meeting because you saw something very unique that set them apart from the other 10. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. Okay, we have time for one more, and we had another resume related question that I think it's the interplay between what this question is about and the summary section I think is interesting. So this person said, I've heard a lot of discussion about how the objectives part of the resume is currently less used. So I think we're thinking here like what your career objectives are, potentially what your goals are. Seeing as how showing passion is an important part of the resume and interview process, would you say it's important to include the objectives aspect of the resume in order to further show that passion?
Great question. Man, great group today. And
Totally.
awesome. You guys are even helping me like, okay. Um, Great point. And it's somewhat subjective because again, objectives has been a part of the job hunting process for so many years now. Recruiters
Yep.
are used to that. We see it all the time. We've seen it over a number of years. That, to be transparent with you, we are kind of quickly going into, okay, let me see what makes them unique outside of this, not, let's not call it robotic, but objective is ding, 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 ding. We've seen a lot of
Yep.
that. I think we're looking for more personal meat, a more personal story, because we know for the most part what you hope to get out of position, and we know that 9 times out of 10 you tailored it to the role, but we are
Yep.
looking for a little bit more. We are somewhat used to that. We are somewhat what's the word? Not that we've become immune to the objective part of the resume, but it's been, I think, such a part of the process that it doesn't allow you necessarily to stand out. Once
Yep.
again, what's going to allow you to stand out is maybe adding in some of those personal stories. Even with some of the achievements that you've had, what's unique to your personal story as it
Yep.
relates to your passion and your goal. So maybe throw in outside of the objective, throw in some personal story about some of the volunteer work you've done or community development. I hope that helps, but we are looking for that uniqueness.
No,
Definitely.
I think the headline of today is like authenticity, drive. You really want to lead with that as opposed to listing out accolades or goals that maybe the majority of people are going to have on their resume because they have a similar
Everyone's
vision of what
everyone's
their
doing
career is going
yeah,
to look like.
everyone's listing their achievements. So
Yeah.
what's gonna set you apart? Add some personal, unique story in there. Some of the
Yep.
things you've done. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I know we're a minute over, so I want to wrap us up. So first of all, Randall, thank you so much for taking time to share with us today. I know this has been really impactful for everybody. And for everyone on the line, we're excited to bring you more events like this in the future. So please take 30 seconds to fill out the post-event survey we're going to drop in the chat so you can let us know what you want to see more of. We'll keep making events for you. In the meantime, be sure to check out our events page to see more of our upcoming recruiter workshops. And with that, have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Guys.
Bye-bye.